Welcome to the Mr. Beacon podcast. This week, I am talking to the Chief Commercial Officer of AiRISTA's, Wyatt. And AiRISTA's, I think, are a really great case study of many things, but they're a very successful real-time location systems IoT company. And for any of us who are either entering this industry or have been around for a while, one of the secrets to success is knowing what's going on and learning from the success and maybe even the failure of other companies. If we're going to be consultative, if we're going to be credible, you need to know who's doing what. And it's fascinating, I think, seeing the people behind some of the websites and the brands. So this week's episode definitely fits the bill in terms of arming you to get to know one of the key players that's emerged as a successful operator in this industry that is so fascinating. So enjoy the interview. So Wyatt, welcome to the Mr. Beacon podcast. I have to confess to being a bit of a collector. I find this segment that you work in, AiRISTA is extremely well regarded, and I think we're all looking at the possibility of digital physical convergence, indoor location, asset tracking, and trying to figure out how is this going to really unfold. And so we look to companies that are successful, and I think AiRISTA is definitely one of those. You're a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for indoor location, and having just got Wyatt into the same category for the first time this year, you've been there for 3 years, and you're on the top right-hand corner, which is the most coveted location. So thanks for coming on the show. I'm looking forward to picking your brains and figuring out how to be successful in this weird part of IoT that we operate. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Extremely happy and grateful to be here today.
Can you introduce those of us that don't know AiRISTA? Can you give us the elevator pitch?
Yeah. So simply put, AiRISTA is like many others in the industry that can provide tags and devices in order to provide and track where items or people are. We do it with multiple technologies, though. So we support Bluetooth, we support Wi-Fi, we support angle of arrival, we even support passive RFID, and we support GPS outdoors. So it's less around the specific technology and really around what are you going to be doing with that data that's flowing into the system. So we're really focused on the software side and how can that software automate workflows for our customers to achieve specific outcomes by industry. So in the case of manufacturing, we're using tags. Again, it depends on the technology, what the problem we're trying to solve, but the tag provides location context. We can then use that information to tie into systems like SAP, manufacturing execution systems, in order to optimize work in process. In the healthcare industry, we can use that location data on staff and have buttons to be able to reduce risk to staff by immediately responding to duress events, where all clinicians on a floor can receive notification and respond very quickly instead of relying on just a security officer. Similarly, we can track patients like many others in the industry, but it's less around knowing where exactly that patient is. And can we tie like a health record system and do an automated discharge? Perhaps before the patient can actually leave the hospital, we need to coordinate a porter. So can we send automated messages to a mobile device, to a tag for that porter, to then optimize and get that patient out as quickly as possible so the next patient can come in. So really focus on the outcomes that location context can provide. A little longer than your typical elevator. Sorry, I dragged on there.
Yeah. Well, it's a tall building and it was good stuff. So I appreciate your giving us that rundown. And I think, one of the things, so this Gartner Magic Quadrant thing is fascinating to me. There aren't a lot of companies in it. The process is really rigorous, and Gartner are the biggest of the industry analysts. So it's quite something to be there. How do you get good ratings in the Magic Quadrant? Well, one of the things is having a really comprehensive kit bag and of lots of different technologies, and which favors companies like yours that have that. How did you end up accruing all of these different technologies to have, the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi angle of arrival, as well as more conventional approaches? How did you? Let's start off with the Wi-Fi Bluetooth thing. How did you end up with both solutions in your portfolio?
Yeah, so good question. So, if you look at AiRISTA's and a little bit of our history, the company actually got started by Cy, who's kind of a serial entrepreneur. And he was really looking at the outdoor location market and having solutions with GPS. Around about 7 years ago, he really saw the indoor market taking off. And to get into that market is when he acquired the Ekahau's RTLS business out of Finland. And so Ekahau was really a leader in the Wi-Fi market. And so that's how AiRISTA's really, for indoor market, really got started with the Wi-Fi. A few years ago, looking at how is industry transitioning, technology transitioning, that's when we really took a hard look around on Bluetooth Low Energy. And so we added that to the portfolio. And nowadays, we also support Bluetooth Low Energy in the newer specs with angle of arrival. So you can get even more accurate than you can get with a Wi-Fi or BLE. So the simple story of how we got into it was through acquisition, by seeing the demand, how could we quickly enter a market? That's entering via Wi-Fi. And then looking at the industry and tech transitions is when we looked at BLE and bringing that on board. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of BLE commodity tags out there. We believe in partnerships. So there are some aspects where we maintain IP around being able to do like tag messaging, two-way communication. But there's other ones where if you just want to have a simple tag that reports location, those are tags that we actually partner with companies and make that part of our portfolio as well. So we look at it as both a build versus buy decision quite frequently.
I think one thing that people will be interested in is what's the decision process that you make when you're doing your consultative selling in terms of recommending which of those different tools to tackle the job with? How do you approach that?
Yeah, the biggest one, it really comes down to what does a specific customer have for their existing infrastructure. I came from Cisco, so I know what the Cisco infrastructure can do. I know what a Aruba infrastructure can do, Ruckus, Extreme, Mist, you name it. And if we have the opportunity to leverage someone's existing infrastructure and it'll meet the requirements, that's always my default preference. I want to make sure IT is in the loop. I want to make sure that the line of business is in the loop, and we're providing what's going to provide the customer with the best total cost of ownership. If a customer doesn't have the necessary infrastructure in place, they would begin to look at what would it cost to put that infrastructure in place, or potentially do overlay networks, such as like BLE gateways. So the one is, what do they have? And then the second thing that factors in the decision is, what accuracy do they really need? And a customer may say, I want 1 meter accuracy. But if you ask them, well, why do you want that 1 meter accuracy? Well, because I read that one of your competitors can do that. Well, that's not really a valid answer. That's where we like to challenge the customer to understand, well, how does 1 meter accuracy really impact the workflows that you need? Maybe it's room level accuracy that they really care about, or zone accuracy. And so depending on the accuracy they need, that will also drive what technology we think makes the most sense. So with Wi-Fi, you're kind of looking at 3 to 5 meters, roughly. BLE, kind of maybe 3 to 5 meters. BLE angle of arrival, you're looking at sub-meter. Ultra wideband, you're looking at sub-meter. Passive RFID, you're looking at choke point. So we really want to understand the customer needs and then recommend what makes the most sense based on the infrastructure and their accuracy requirements.
So with comparable accuracy for kind of general BLE versus Wi-Fi, why would you go for Bluetooth rather than Wi-Fi?
Another good question. So the reason why we invested in BLE, battery life, size, those are the two predominant ones. So when you're looking at Wi-Fi, it is a battery hungry technology. So if it's just location, works great. However, the size of the tags, because you need larger batteries, that means you may have more operational burden to manage the tags if they're not rechargeable. So those are some of the factors as to why we really invested in the BLE technology. But Wi-Fi does travel farther. So depending on the customer's infrastructure, Wi-Fi may actually work better location-wise than you would do with BLE. So lots of factors that come into play.
Well, I guess people are comforted by the fact that sometimes, you speak to someone and all they sell is angle of arrival, then you pretty much know what the answer is going to be. Whereas I guess your consultative credentials are boosted by the fact that they can see that it's really you genuinely trying to figure out what the best tool is for the job.
Correct. Yeah.
A couple of more things before we move on to kind of up the stack and talk more about the use cases and the business applications. So I've always been fascinated by angle of arrival because, when people ask for more accuracy, I kind of want to be able to say yes. But I have definitely learned that that isn't always needed. When is it needed? What are the use cases where you see that the angle of arrival actually has a place to play?
Yeah, I can give you a couple examples. So one would be in manufacturing. If you just want to track where, let's say I'm making an airframe for an aircraft, and that airframe needs a specific seat. United has different seats than Delta Airlines. So I need to be able to know where the Delta seat is if I'm building that Delta airframe. And, massively large manufacturing plants can be difficult to find that to make sure it's at the right station at the right time. So in that case, you don't need sub-meter accuracy. You're going to be able to walk around. You're going to be able to see, okay, seats are in this general area. I can find the one I need and then bring it to my station. However, in manufacturing, say I'm making something smaller, an automobile, and I want to drive a specific replenishment when an asset comes into my zone or leaves the zone. The zone might be only 2 meters by 2 meters. So in that case, if your accuracy is 3 meters, that's not going to work. So if you want to trigger a replenishment or a specific action by entering that zone, you need sub-meter accuracy in that case. So that's an example where if I just want to know something roughly where it is, I don't need accuracy. But if I want to drive specific workflows in SAP or other systems, then I may need that assurance, 100% reliability or 100% probability that it's there. In healthcare, a common use case is like nurse call clearance. And so there you don't need 1 meter accuracy. What matters more is room level accuracy. And so that's where you see companies, including ourselves, we might have infrared on attack. So infrared doesn't travel outside the walls, whereas like Wi-Fi and BLE do. So that's kind of examples where if you really need that 100% probability that something is where you think it is in a small zone, that's where that sub-meter really comes into play.
So if you're going down the BLE route, why not just have it in your back pocket? It's always going to be more accurate. Why doesn't everyone just go for angle of arrival? Why would you counsel someone to kind of think twice about putting that to the top of their requirements list?
Good question. And it gets back to the infrastructure. So today's access point providers, they build BLE, standard BLE into their access points. They don't support angle of arrival. So in order to do an angle of arrival deployment, that means you need to install extra antenna throughout your facility. Same thing like with RFID. If you're deploying that extra infrastructure, that comes at a cost. Same thing with infrared. That extra infrastructure has an extra cost. So we don't advocate and including the wiring costs with it. There's lots of costs that add up. It's not just the antenna that you're deploying. And so that's where we always kind of counsel our customers is we have it if you need it, but do you really need it? Because it could easily double the price of a deployment.
This infrastructure overhead it's really been, I think, the thing that has held the beacon market back, the IoT market back. So it makes sense to leverage Wi-Fi where it's there. And the nice thing about Wi-Fi is it's kind of already paid for. It's not like you're doing this, whatever the project is, you're working for the VP of supply chain. He probably doesn't need to justify the cost of the Wi-Fi because they needed it just for a ton of other use cases and it genuinely is infrastructure with so many use cases that the line of business doesn't pay for it. The IT organization pays for it. I'm very interested. What do you think the likelihood is that the IT organization will absorb, more of this infrastructure cost over time? Because let's face it, there's many use cases that you can tackle with Bluetooth location. So, is it possible, realistic, that the CIO is going to say, yeah, we're not going to debate whether we need Wi-Fi. Obviously, we need Wi-Fi, and obviously, we need RTLS because there's going to be like 50 use cases, 10 different departments. What's your view on getting that cost off of the books of the nursing operations or store operations and into this what seems like a much bigger checkbook that's wielded by the CIO?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, every opportunity that we engage with, we need to be talking to typically the CIO, the director of IT, director of infrastructure, and the line of business. It's an and conversation. If we talk only to the line of business, it's very well that IT may have a different strategy in mind, or there could be misalignment, and then you lead to projects potentially not moving forward for a multitude of reasons. So the key thing, though, is engaging early. In some cases, IT might not be aware of RTLS, so they're deploying a network for data grade, or they're deploying a network for voice grade. And voice grade sometimes is good enough for RTLS, but oftentimes not. And so for RTLS grade, we kind of want signal levels from 3 access points at a certain threshold. Whereas voice grade, really, you only need 1. And so if IT is doing an overall access point modernization effort, we need to make sure that they really understand the need for RTLS. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bring together that line of business buyer, the person that has that outcome they're trying to solve, with IT, so we have that strategic decision. If IT's roadmap is 3 years out from modernization, then that means we might need to do a temporary overlay network to support what the business needs. But all along, we know we're always thinking down the road of how can we leverage the network and help IT make the case that they can take it on in the future.
Why isn't the Cisco sales force selling more denser deployments to support not just communications but RTLS? You'd think it would be absolutely in their interest to do that.
They are. So they are. When I was at Cisco, that was a big part of the role that I was in. I was educating the sellers on what is RTLS. I mean, the Cisco sellers, the Aruba sellers, the HP sellers, they have such large portfolios. So sometimes it's finding the seller that truly understands the outcome that the customer wants. So when the sales organization is meeting at the CIO level, meeting with line of business and talking about those transformational roadmaps, then typically they are talking about RTLS, and they're talking about, look, here's what others in your industry are doing. If you want to be on par, you need to make sure you have the right IT infrastructure in place to enable those outcomes. And so the good sellers are doing that at the companies I mentioned. But a lot of people they have such large portfolios that it's not top of mind to them. So unfortunately.
Yeah, so I think this is a reason to be cheerful about the future. I think as healthcare or retail, grocery, they start to see all these applications, then hopefully just the level of education on all sides goes up. Let's move on from the technology and the business drivers for buying it, and let's talk a bit more about the verticals. You've got this incredibly broad portfolio of technology. What are the areas, what are the industries that are driving the most business for what you have to offer?
Yeah. And I will say, that was also factored in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, is they look at, are you a niche player with one technology in one industry, or do you have multiple technologies that can apply to multiple verticals? And so I think that's one reason why really AiRISTA's stood out and got into the leaders quadrant. But to answer your question, healthcare is our largest vertical, very large deployments around the world. Australia is a good market for us, North America, UK, Germany, very large markets for us. And the use cases in healthcare are some of the ones I already mentioned. It's around staff duress. How can we provide and help ensure that nurses feel safe in their positions to improve retention that they have, and truly making sure that they can make a difference and that fear isn't just always in the back of their mind. Looking at asset tracking there, patient tracking are some of those other use cases. I'd say our second largest vertical beyond that is in manufacturing, but manufacturing, as you know, is a huge industry in and of itself. So within manufacturing, we were really successful more in what I call the lot size of one concept, meaning if you're making that aircraft example, you're making that aircraft for a specific customer in mind. When you make a combine, I don't know if anyone said, if you've ever been or our listeners have been to a John Deere plant, they make those $300,000 combines built to order. So it's a specific configuration. I mean, Harley Davidson does a lot of lot size of one, custom orders. And so anytime you're building something, a lot size of one means you need to have a really high level of coordination between your people and your inventory and the assets required to produce that item. So those are the two largest verticals, but we're also in education. For those of our listeners in the US, many states have what's called AiRISTA's law. It's unfortunate it got put in the books because we have had so many school shootings. It's how can you provide that emergency response, using RTLS to improve school safety. Many states also have their regulations for hospitality workers, room attendants. And so they require room attendants would have a badge that they can wear and press a button if they face duress. So these are some of the other verticals we're in. Mining is another one, but really the two largest are healthcare and manufacturing.
And are you seeing any traction in defense? Because I'm a history buff, and I love the looking at Grant's memoirs that he wrote when he was dying of cancer and needed to get some money so his family should continue. And I think he was obviously a celebrated general. He was an amazing president, but one of his key skills was supply chain. He's like, get the inventory to keep the army going. But it's a challenging market as well, with all of the bureaucracy and long time scales. What's your view on defense?
So again, defense is a massive industry in itself. So defense, you have the supply chain, defense industrial base, which we do work with. So that's around the manufacturing and ensuring the right parts are there available to our to the soldiers, the war fighters. But then to your point, logistics is a whole nother area. So we are in the outdoor RTLS market as well as the indoor. And so that's where we do have GPS-based tags, and GPS-based tags also can act as a BLE gateway. So if you have BLE tags on assets and then you put them on basically a container or a truck that has a GPS tag, now you can track in real time where your containers are, your trucks are, and what's on those containers and within those on those trucks. So it's an interesting market, one that I think is evolving very quickly. But we just did a white paper on that exact use case I spoke to, I think just this week. You'll find it on our website.
I think this feels a bit like an advertorial, but credit where credit's due. You guys just put out an announcement about being in one of the top 50 fastest growing companies. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So you must be feeling pretty optimistic. What are give us your crystal ball view of the future for the real-time location IoT marketplace. What makes you optimistic for your company and also generally for the industry?
Yeah. So I'll probably give a long-winded answer on this, but going back, it was a really hard decision for me to leave Cisco. I was in a great position leading global industry teams. And what led me to finally leave Cisco was looking at the potential of the RTLS market. So whether you subscribe to Forrester, IDC, Gartner, you name it, they're all projecting the RTLS market by 2030 to be 10 plus billion, some $50 billion. So seeing that potential and be able to join AiRISTA, who, as you mentioned, has been in the Leaders Quadrant, the Magic Quadrant for 3 years now, that's what really attracted me away because of the potential. So I'm really excited by how the technology is evolving. 10 years ago, everyone was around IoT in the hype cycle. You could put a tag or a sensor on anything and get that data in there. But people were doing it without actually thinking about the value add. It was like, should I put a sensor on anything because I can? No. You should only put sensors on things that make sense. And so that's what excites me today about the RTLS market is you could put a sensor on everything, but again, does that make sense? No. It's looking at what use cases truly do make sense. And so right now, I see a number of use cases in healthcare, number of use cases in manufacturing. Manufacturing is just ripe. The market's ripe for companies like ourselves, yourself, to come in and help solve those problems. And then regulations are constantly evolving. In the U.S., there's a bill out there right now where retail workers in the state of New York would require a badge or a button of some type that they could press if they're in duress. So regulations can further help accelerate market demand. Same thing in healthcare. In Australia, there are regulations around staff must have a duress badge. In the US, there really isn't a regulation. However, there's talk about it. In the UK, with the Labour Party taking government, we're seeing, they're kind of a lagger with RTLS compared to the US market. But with Labour Party coming in and really looking at how can they create efficiencies, we're seeing more and more demand for RTLS. So when you get a central government behind RTLS, then you begin to see action. So that's really what excites me is the need, the cost of technology coming down is opening up more opportunities for value to be derived. And then, of course, as more countries come aboard and regulations change, it's just going to further accelerate the market.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I look at the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act, Rule 204, which is like better, more accurate, more rapid tracking of essentially at the case level foods on an ever-expanding food traceability list. I think that's another one. And then over in Europe, the digital product passport laws, it's going to get rolled out over time. But where did this product come from? Giving more information to consumers about what they're buying. And then I look at climate as well. The best way to cut carbon, I think there's huge untapped opportunities to take wholesale supply chains and start to turn the lights on there so that you can see all of the inventory up and down the supply chain. And the reason I'm optimistic about that is not because I think people will get religion on climate change, but because they'll save cost as well as carbon when they do that. So this kind of alignment of consumers wanting to know more about what they're buying, more of a driver on efficiency, which we have to do as more and more of the world is aspirational and has the ability to buy things. And we've got to get smart about the way we make and distribute things. So I think it's a good time to be in our industry. Wyatt, thanks so much for sharing some of your secrets for success, for giving us an introduction to AiRISTA's and how you got in the top right-hand corner of the Gartner Magic Quadrant.
Yeah, thank you again. And a lot of hard work. And I definitely have to give a shout out to all the team members in engineering, marketing, our leadership. So it is a complete team effort that got AiRISTA's into that quadrant.
Wyatt, how I'm always interested in how people got to where they got to. Normally, we are interviewing leaders in the companies that we engage with, and I think there's people that will be listening to this, and part of what they'll be thinking about is learning about the industry and the technology and who does what. And part of it is, how can I get a job like Wyatt? How did you get this role?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Steve. So a lot of hard work and some luck as the simple answer, but to give you some perspective. So I started out as a mechanical engineer in college and really focused. I love the idea of solving problems and developing solutions for customers. Realized that I didn't want to spend my entire career as a mechanical engineer, and that's how I got into the dirty world of sales and product management. But from that aspect, I've always been focused, though, wanting to engage with customers in different industries, understand their problem sets. So early in my career, I worked for services companies where it was hands-on, looking at what a customer's problem is and what solutions can we come up with to deliver on the outcomes. Then I spent, after 15 years in that, I spent 8 years with Cisco Systems in a similar capacity where I was really working as an advisor for customers. Again, what were their digital transformation objectives and how could Cisco as a tech company partner with them to achieve those outcomes? And toward the end of my career at Cisco, I really got into some leadership opportunities. And that's where I got into the world of really looking at ecosystem partnerships. Few companies can truly deliver everything that a customer needs on their own. To really be successful, you need to have partnerships. And that's where at Cisco, I got to know AiRISTA. We got to know other people in RTLS because Cisco couldn't deliver on outcomes around patient safety, asset tracking, but they did have the network that could enable it. And so that was my capacity. But again, always focused on what are those customers' objectives and outcomes that they want to solve. And then I made the jump to AiRISTA in a leadership position in the sales organization. Again, my focus is really on those partnerships. What partnerships does AiRISTA need in order to help customers save time, save money, create those efficiencies, reduce risk to staff for many of our customers? And so that's kind of a long story about how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and Cisco are an amazing company, massive, central, and I think have an incredible perspective because of all of the partners they have. It gives you the opportunity to look across those and make your own calculus about who's got the opportunity to grow and kind of almost benchmark the different companies against each other. So I think it's a smart place to do that, to make that decision about moving from the middle of a massive company to the top echelon of a small company with potential to grow. Well, so thanks for that. And now on the personal side of things, we have our traditional question. What's the first of the three songs that have some meaning for you?
Yeah, that's truly a unique question. And I kind of look at it as different phases of my life. What did certain songs mean, and how does it impact me today? So when I was a teenager in high school, I won't say I was the most mature at that point in time in my life, but the song that kind of that sticks out was "Fight for Her Right" by the Beastie Boys. So people might be listening to this and wondering, how does that really apply? Why is that meaningful? And as I reflect on it, my sales personality is that of, as a challenger. So I like to kind of challenge customers, really understand the needs, dig into what's driving someone's behavior. At the same time, I've taken other personality tests, and I'm a debater against the wishes of my family at times and others. But it's that aspect of, understanding the city. It's a fun, upbeat song, but it's also reflects the aspect of, why do I need to do something, and a little bit of a challenger side. So that's the first one.
I think every salesperson needs that motivational, energizing song that they can listen to when they're going into a meeting, and they kind of need a virtual slap on the back to get them going. So you were mentioning some personality types there, and I'm a sucker for anything which has a quadrant in it and tells you what kind of person you are. What was that personality framework? What are the different dimensions of it?
Yeah, there's a few. So Myers-Briggs is one standard that many companies use. The sales personality one, there's a book, again, I'm dating myself, probably 10, 20 years ago now. A book was written called The Challenger Sale. And it looked at different sales personalities specifically. So, and I don't think that there's one personality that fits the bill, but there was a category, some people might be categorized as a relationship seller, meaning that's really what they focus on, is building those relationships. That's kind of their default. There's others that are kind of like a lone wolf personality that, they're the ones that will just go do everything on their own. They don't necessarily bring in others and share much. And then the challenger personality, that's one that's really more, I would say, inquisitive. So anyone that's in consultative selling, by default, to be successful, has to be a challenger in some form. You're asking those questions. You're trying to understand why the customer approached something a certain way. And then if you think that they're making mistakes, you're providing input and guiding them on, here's what I heard. However, I think this is a better direction for you, and you can be able to explain why. So that's kind of, there's a book written about it. There's a few other personality traits, but definitely I think for people that are thinking about entering sales, if you're just selling features and benefits off a data sheet, you can do that in many different ways. But if you're getting into something more complex and consultative selling, definitely I think you need to make sure you understand how the challenger type profile would benefit you in your career.
Yeah, I think that consultative selling technique is what makes sales satisfying and stimulating for me. If you're doing it properly, you're willing to listen and you're judicious in what you say, but you're also confident enough and assertive enough to maybe make your prospect feel a little uncomfortable, but also be constructive and respectful and offer them the kind of the way forward that's going to get them to success. I think it's a great approach. And my favorite framework is also dating myself. I think it's still around, but Versatile Salesperson, which is very similar, but you're kind of assessing your own strengths. You can be tell assertive or ask assertive. You can be expressive or analytical. And then you basically try and figure out who you're talking to and decide, are they a driver? Do I need to give them options? Are they an amiable? Do I need to build that relationship? Are they analytical? I need to give them the facts, or are they expressive? Do they need to know what the trends are and the story behind what's going? And the reality is none of us fall neatly into just one. We have tendencies one way or the other, but I think we all have sort of a comfort zone, and knowing where yours is, where the comfort zone of the person you're talking to, and moving to meet them is kind of what makes it fun. So that was a long time on one song. We'll go faster on the others. What's number 2?
The second one is from my college years. It's not a song that many people would listen to unless you went to Purdue, and that is Hail Purdue. So it's the song from my alma mater for undergraduate studies, and as a big place in my heart. I am on the Twin Cities Purdue Alumni Board, where I act as treasurer, and I like to give back in scholarships, really bringing alumni together, but also then guiding and advising students who are there currently. But Purdue played a huge part of my life. If you look behind me, you can probably see a few things on a shelf behind me referencing Purdue. But I was grateful to be at the Final Four this year in the final game, even though Purdue lost. But yeah, huge place in my heart. And I think it always will for the rest of my life. Made some great friendships. And so whenever you hear that song, I just get a smile on my face. And I look back at all the friendships I made there.
I can understand why. Yeah, belonging, having connection, and having purpose. It touches on all of those things. So what's number 3?
And so after college, I was on my own for a while, but I did meet the love of my life, my wife. We have 2 great boys. And so this song is highly influenced by my wife. It's The Luckiest by Ben Folds. So it really applies to my personal life, where I feel extremely lucky to have the family, the support I've always had, but then also looking at just what the song The Luckiest is about, just how I got to where I am in my career. Extremely beneficial for the family and friends that I've had along the way, and the support given to me.
Yeah, we just celebrated our 31st anniversary, and the thing that occurred to me was this was the biggest decision of my life. I don't think you really understand how important it is. I mean, everyone knows it's important, but in many ways, one of the easiest decisions for me. But so I think we're both lucky in that respect.
Yeah, I would say it's the costliest too. So costliest.
That's true.
But providing the greatest return. That's how I would say it. Yeah,
very good.
That's making the greatest return that I can have.
Wyatt, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate everything you've shared with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Mr. Beacon Ambient IoT podcast here on YouTube. You can listen to this episode on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed it, please like and share this video. And be sure to subscribe for more videos. For more information about Wyatt, Ambient IoT, and IoT Pixels, head over to wyatt.com.